Hello and welcome back to Season 2, Episode 12 of The Dive. Between the old guard and NA falling, EU LCS franchising, and a roundup of the major regions, we have a lot to cover. So let's get into it.
I'm pretty excited, man. I think it's. I'd like to start on some of the NA stuff because I'm biased towards that, and like we're gonna have a new champion, right? And I think it's pretty crazy that TSM, C9, CLG, all of them are out of playoffs, and it's not that they're out of playoffs in the finals. They're out of playoffs. They're not even going to Miami, right? This is the quarterfinals, and kind of all the old guard former champions are already gone. And it's, I think, very exciting time to be a fan of the NA LCS, to see a new champion crown and to see these new orgs actually, coming into the scene and performing this well and kind of bringing some new hype.
I definitely think it's exciting as far as the organizations go. I want to temper it with all this talk of, oh my God, everything's changing. It's so crazy now. With like, if you look at the actual players that are making it further on to playoffs, and
no tempering,
and still on these teams, like Team Liquid has 3/5 of the CLG squad that actually
brand new players.
They've got
Who's this double lift rookie?
Impact in there, and then 100 Thieves. They have Afromove. They have Meteos. These guys have been there before. If you actually look at like Clutch and stuff, though, then you're like, okay, it's a bunch of new, the Envy guys finally getting up there, and that being the team to beat TSM, I think was kind of the most shocking thing.
Yeah,
I feel like that is the super huge upset, right? Everyone expecting, even all the like players and coaches that we talked to leading up to this,
right?
Everyone was still like, oh my God, TSM is just so scary, wrecking people in scrims, and they're returning to form and all of this, and now they're breaking the streak, the legacy.
Yeah, it's over. The 10 finals in a row. You can never say I've made every single finals ever again because they haven't. And it was, I think it took a little bit to sink in for me when I was on the analyst test doing the broadcast, because I was kind of hyped that Clutch Gaming made it, right? Mm-hmm. And the fact that TSM had been to every single finals, and the fact that they had won 3 splits in a row, and the fact that they're the only org to make it to every single world championship, and now, if you think about it, like they blew up their roster by switching out 3 players, had the shaky regular season. We were all ready to write it off, like, oh, this has happened before. They clearly have it together now because they played 5 games in a row that have looked good, right? That's pretty much what we're going off of, because you go back to week 5 or 6 and they were shaky. They lose that game 2 to Clutch, and it's right back to that shaky TSM. Like, they definitely had, in my opinion, some unsolved issues. And what I'm really curious about now is, what does TSM do from here? Do they just take a break, say we're going to take longer to develop our synergy? I don't really know if there's that many other players that are available, but if you think back to like TSM history, when's the last time they didn't make a change in the middle of a split? Because 2016, when they brought in Yellowstar, after spring, they finished second, they got rid of Yellowstar, they brought in Biofrost, right? Then Doublelift left after that World Championship, they brought in Wild Turtle. Then Wild Turtle left, they brought back in
Doublelift one, it was like him wanting to take a break.
It was him wanting to leave, so...
It fits, keep going with your storyline.
It fits the narrative, Kobe. It fits the narrative. But also, from Reginald, like, this is such a failure based on TSM's expectations.
Yeah.
Especially when in the offseason he says, we knew this team wasn't going to be good enough. We're going to switch Parth from coach to GM. We're going to bring in a big Korean coach from Immortals. We're going to bring in Sven and Mithi, the gods of the West. We're going to bring in Mike Young, the most hyped NA resident free agent. Like, they did all this stuff to then not even make semifinals. Like, that failure needs to at least have responsibility taken, or they just need to make a really hard line decision to go for it again. But it's uncharted territory for TSM.
It really is, and I do think, well, it's a big failure to lose, with that roster, with everything, like as far as their expectations and their history in the quarterfinals. At the same time, pre-quarterfinals, they were 9-1 in their last 10. They had been looking like they had massively improved from the first half of the split, I think. So there are still positives there as far as like looking long term. I mean, if CLG is willing to say, yep, we improved enough that we want to stick with this roster, TSM, I think, by that same kind of token, should be willing to do the same. The question is just, I guess, like, even if you decide you want to do changes, what would those changes be? Who can you get in the middle of the season? And I think that, like, as far as players go, there's probably not a lot of options, right? Like, Double's not going to come back just because you got knocked out of playoffs, right? Like, that's not going to happen. I think if there's any change, the only one I could pinpoint is probably seeing coaching change, right? Like, if there's something that you're going to do, if you want to make a change, if you're saying, hey, this is unacceptable, the buck needs to drop somewhere, it's probably on the coach. And that's how it happens in a lot of traditional sports. And, you know, first time Parth is out, like, Parth got flamed a lot, but they did pretty well with Parth, right? You know, maybe something happens.
I think Reggie gets involved again.
It's certainly possible.
I think that it is a lot of the teams learned after the big offseason we had that shaking up rosters and trying to get players to work well with each other is going to take a lot of time. So yeah, I don't see very many of the teams making actual roster swaps, except maybe the super bottom teams and the ones that have already announced it. Because,
Farewell, Zig. Thank you, Lemon Nation.
Because the top ones, I think, have rosters that can work. A lot of our top teams, like we were talking about coming into playoffs, we're talking about being so close and a lot of potential here with a lot of these different teams. And I think that has been one of the biggest things is, with all of TSM's changes and stuff, we had the biggest strengthening of the league around TSM than we have had in such a long time.
Yep.
You know, usually from year to year, we're like, okay, you know, they have this stacked roster once again. I think the double lift Biofrost, Svenskeren, Bjergsen, and Hanser roster might have been actually their most popular roster. But yeah, you're talking about blowing that up and dispersing them, and then also bring in a lot of more high-powered imports. Just completely strengthen like the top 6 or 7 teams.
The competition around them, and I mean, kind of just doubling back on the significance of TSM, C9, and COG, all of our previous champions in the 5 years in North American LCS not even being in semifinals, from an org standpoint, imagine if franchising never happened, right? Imagine that Clutch Gaming and 100 Thieves don't exist, right? TSM's in semifinals. We're not having this conversation, right? They probably, you know, maybe the investment doesn't come in the same way for Team Liquid. Maybe Double If stays with TSM. Maybe Reggie never needs to spend a bunch of money to do Sven and Mithy and need this disruption in his roster. And maybe they just keep on trucking along. But I think 100 Thieves and Clutch entering the system and being so strong, and even Echo Fox totally retooling their team, even though they're technically not an org that's in because of franchising.
It's a new iteration.
Yeah, I think a lot of this stuff doesn't happen in the way that everyone was kind of pushed to try and make these really big bets. Definitely created a really volatile split. And I think the playoffs help prove that it wasn't just purely best of one volatility. Yeah. I think best of one volatility still exists. Totally. Like, I think with best of 3, the regular season standings probably aren't a 4-way tie for third, but still there's going to be a close skill level 1 through 6 in the NA LCS, so I think that part's cool too.
It is really cool, and I actually really like that you brought that up, because there has been a number of times, I think, even, you know, just since I started casting here, where it's like, oh, there's so much parity, right? And then JK playoffs come and teams get like 3-0 in the quarterfinals, and then okay, TSM's gonna be in the finals again, right? And it honestly was starting to feel like that, and I think a lot of people were getting that feeling that, yeah, okay, game 1, Clutch got slammed, all right, easy 3-0 for TSM, and then they're gonna win the semifinals, of course, and then, you know, but it didn't happen like that at all. And I am interested to see what fan expectations / reactions are going to be going into summer split, because I just think that for most of these teams, there's not any options to change players. Like, there's not better players. Even if you say TSM must change their bottom line, like, who do you get that is better? You know what I mean? Even if you're one of those fans who really feels like things need to be shaken up, or C9 or CLG even, there's like the reason that you can change, like, say, like a Golden Guardians or an Optic or whatever, is because there's upgrades straight from Academy, right? Yeah. There's no Academy player that is going to be an upgrade over like any TSM player, any C9 player. Like, I just don't see that.
And also, one other thing is, the last time the TSM had the bad spring split where they went either 9-9 or 10-8 in the regular season and then made that giant run to finals, dropped Yellowstar, and then they picked up Biofrost from like the ether. Right, he had played a little bit of challenger on a team that wasn't very good, but like, I feel like those gems that are just kind of sitting out there, undiscovered talent, don't necessarily exist with Academy anymore. Like, you can see who the junglers are. And I don't think there's just going to be, like, let's say TSM actually did want to say, let's try out a different jungler. I don't know if
That's the thing about those gems, though. You can't point to them right now, right? They're the undiscovered ones, right?
Yeah.
Nero was talking about how he thinks there's a lot of talent. The Echo Fox coach. They actually used Demonte on stage. I thought he looked fine.
Yeah.
And Papa Chow as well. I thought was decently.
I think there's lots of good players, but I'm talking like upgrades to some of the players who are some of the best, like most storied players, right?
I mean, for sure, because in order to be an upgrade for us analysts to like look at the player and observe them and be like, yeah, okay, that's an upgrade, they have to have history, and there's only so many people that have history. So like that's what you're dealing with is the list of things that we've already seen, and that's a quantity that's can be defined.
Experience matters a lot too, right? As far as being able to, even if you can perform well in one meta, or even if you can perform well in one stage, then maybe going further can get tougher. Like look at Licorice. Licorice, I think he was at one of those gems, right? And he has been found, and I think this guy has an incredibly bright future.
Yeah.
I think that as he becomes a more well-rounded player, he is going to be one of the best top laners in the league for sure, right? And he already is up there.
There's gems in NA.
There's gems in NA, right?
Gold in them thar hills.
Exactly, but even with Licorice, who it's hard to see it really panning out much better for this guy that not a lot of people had known internationally or anything like that. There was still weaknesses in his play. His tank play was never as good, and these sorts of things. And even that you couldn't really call an upgrade over.
Impact said he was bad, didn't he? Or was that Impact? There was some interview where someone one of the top.
I'm sure there is some trash talk.
Now I'm gonna have to go back and research it because I might be misattributing. But I also think it's interesting that as we're having strengthening around our typical top teams, talking about all the banner teams and stuff like that. There can only be one winner, right? There can only be so many good teams in the league. And if everyone is strengthening and everyone has this, it's such a letdown if we're not in the finals.
Yeah.
Well, there's going to be a lot of teams that are let down.
Yeah.
If 100 Thieves start to get used to, placing number one, and Clutch Gaming's like, oh yeah, you know what?
We need to be
we're also
or higher.
We also need to have so that we have like 8 teams that are like, if we don't make finals, then
there's going to be changes.
A big failure. Yeah, it starts to get a really crowded space. So that's why I think is really cool about what could possibly happen like in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are talking about the TSM Clutch upset because that's the biggest disparity. This 6 versus 3. Clutch Gaming was like a lot of people still kind of imagine them as Envy, although improved. But the Cloud9 0-3 to Team Liquid also. Even though Team Liquid made all the big upgrades in the offseason, if you were looking at from the brand perspective again, that would be a very big upset, right? Cloud9 fans were extremely disappointed because they had such a good first half of the spring,
right?
And then had this trail off. Yet Jack's like, yeah, no way I'm making roster changes. We're going to build it with these guys. We're going to try and improve. So I think it's really interesting, and it'll be more fun to see how teams can actually get to that next level rather than making these big improvements that we're used to between splits or in the off season of, oh yeah, we got better players, right? You're talking about those just looking at them upgrades where you're like, yep, I'm pretty sure that guy's better than this one. But actually like creating your own improvement because you're going to have to start doing that since there's so much competition.
Yeah, definitely the case, and I agree. I think we'd be talking more about the C9 thing as this big shocking thing where they got 3-0'd.
If Clutch didn't
just blast TSM, right? And then that is kind of just trumps it all because of this and because of everything else. But another big story on the table: EU is franchising.
Ayo.
And I think it's pretty exciting, for some of the reasons that we kind of just touched on, as far as franchising can bring in new blood, it can shake up the league. You're hoping that some of the teams that are traditional bottom feeders are gonna get, replaced, and that cool new orgs are gonna come in, and we're gonna have like, Real Madrid in the EU LCS and stuff.
Yeah, I'll just hit some of the main notes for those of you who are not living on Reddit. Okay. But it's EU LCS franchising. The articles on all esports. They're basically like, in a nutshell, they're removing relegation. They're creating long-term partnerships that unlocks revenue sharing, and they want to partner with the strong organizations. It is another one of those things where they have 10 teams. They're splitting up rev sharing between players, orgs, and Riot, and they're basically opening their application process, much like the North American application process was opened fairly on in 2017. And the 2019 spring split, they say will be the first franchised one. I'm looking forward to seeing how many football clubs get in. Had to not say soccer clubs. Catch myself. But yeah, football clubs.
Maybe you have to say both so that everyone's happy.
So that no one gets confused. The soccer
Or
clubs.
everyone gets confused.
Yeah.
Or that, yeah. If you say both, then I'm pretty sure people will figure it out. But if you only say football, then
why would the NFL teams go to Europe?
You're going to be like, wait a second.
Because it's really big in London. I hear they do viewing parties.
Yeah. Honestly, though, I'm also super excited for it because, like, recently, Oslo is the example I was going to give, but he keeps on tweeting out about the parasites and the teams leeching off of the few that are doing the work. Yeah, that's why I liked your term, bottom feeders or whatever, because he has used quite a lot of variations of that. Maybe he's looking up the thesaurus or something with all the different types of parasites. But yeah, he has some pretty strong opinions, I think, because he has put a lot of work, into G2 as far as the brand, and I think they did a very good job. Them, Fnatic, and Vitality,
I think Splice,
Schalke, Splice. Yeah, I think those are the ones that kind of come to mind most for me when I think about teams for European LCS where I'll watch those games and I'll be excited. But yeah, I would definitely be happy to have some upgrades as far as the other ones too. So
Ocelot sent out this tweet 22 hours ago. He said, "It would be my absolute pleasure to have great brands from other regions and industries in the EU LCS so that we finally get rid of all the parasites leeching off the hard work of a few. Give me more competitors that actually care about winning and building a fan base."
Oof.
There he wants
Tell me how you really feel.
Yeah.
he feels like he's got this backpack and he's carrying the rest of these team owners.
Plus, you got to
He's
look
won
at
4 splits in a row with G2.
Hard to argue.
yeah. I think it's really exciting, and if more money goes into EU, then we can steal away some more LCK players from another region, and we can just bleed them dry, and we can get all the good players.
But how can we continue stealing if now they're richer than us with all these?
No, see, we both steal. We both steal.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
We both steal their players from Korea, not
So
from
we
each
team
other.
up.
We team up.
Exactly.
It's exactly. We need. Clearly, one of us is not good enough to take down the LCK. We need everyone stealing their players. Vietnam needs to grow. LPL needs to steal more players. Everyone needs to do their part and steal all the Korean players, so the LCK finally doesn't.
G2 lost their bot lane to TSM. That means G2 just gets SKT's bot lane for next year.
Take Def to Mata. Get them in there.
Get KT's bot lane. Now we'll see.
Somebody break apart King Zone, please. Or it doesn't not gonna matter.
Impossible.
Somebody get Peanut. TSM, do your part.
Yeah, hopefully, I'll be keeping up with that news as it comes out, but we'll know the franchise teams before the free agency period at the end of the year.
I'm excited for their playoffs too, because actually this split, Vitality at the beginning of this split was my favorite team. Because not just because Gilius trash talking and I love the trash talking also, but their Italian mid laner Jizuki, he was popping off with some crazy 1v3s and stuff like that, and had some really good rise play.
Yep.
But they're gonna be playing Fnatic. And I'm always like, that's the legacy team, right? And you're always excited to see Fnatic and Reckless play. So I think that their playoffs are also going to be really fun.
Yeah,
keep tabs on that.
It is going to be pretty exciting, and we're going to start getting into, as we're getting closer and closer to MSI, we're going to be getting more and more into some of these other regions playoffs, and if you guys are EU or LCK or LPL fans, you can look forward to some more discussions about how we see some of these regions going into MSI in the coming weeks.
Yeah, things I'm going to be looking out for, as Kobe mentioned, is Fnatic versus Vitality is super exciting. Even the one on Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific time with G2 and Splice, I do think it's up in the air, so to speak. Fnatic is definitely the favorite in the European LCS playoffs, but with the way the season's been going, especially in EU, anything can happen. LCK, the whole playoffs is going to be super exciting because you have the World Championship rematch in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, that's actually
as SKT
insane.
squeaked into the playoffs.
SKT got in. I said there's 0% chance they make it to MSI. They've got a long ways to go, but there is a slightly more than 0% chance.
I didn't give it a 0, but I didn't even think they'd make playoffs.
Yeah.
And
they needed so much help to get playoffs, too.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy. But then, just because it's SKT, it's always in the back of your head. It's like, wait, do they just go to MSI
So-
now? Like, you're like,
Coma-
wait a second here.
Coma gave an interview and he was like, I want to make all the other playoff teams feel the pressure that we felt all season long.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, that's kind of going to happen, right?
Unless they just get smashed in the first round.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, if the fairy tale starts to like come true though, with each set that they win, you're like, oh my
I mean,
God.
if they get to the finals, then you start really sweating. You're like, oh my God, they're just good again randomly. It's Faker. You can't beat them.
I am convinced that we're 100% going to see Kingzone at MSI though.
I think Kingzone is
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure everybody's.
I always have this thought in the back of my head with the way
TSM
Korea does their
though.
playoff format, how Kingzone was so dominant in the regular season. They don't play again until April 14th.
Yep.
Like, I'm always worried about the team that's waiting at the end of that gauntlet playoff format, whether or not they'd be rusty or whether or not the game has changed a little bit. Because their playoffs are on patch 8.6. Kingzone would not have played on stage in pro on
I'm not worried for them.
8.6.
I'm
I'm a little worried.
I always like this discussion because it's two sides kind of the same coin. Where like I was always and probably on the side of the coin that like I want to play as many games as possible and be as ready as possible. I consider very different practice games versus stage games, right? So I just wanted to play games, be warmed up, and I was like, yep, we're gonna be better and we're gonna win. But then there's a lot of other people who are like, well, but we have unique strategies that we don't want to show, and you get to hide a lot of that. You get to do more scouting. So it's like the rustiness factor, which was what I would always be worried about, versus, well, they don't have to show anything.
Yep.
And now you're on 8.6. No one knows what their take is on 8.6, and if they're wrong, that sucks for them. But if they're right and they have hidden strategies, they can see what everyone else is doing all the way up, and then say, how do we best beat that? And no one gets to have any idea.
Yeah, I mean, I like the debate between taking time off, practicing, and hiding stuff versus being warmed up and having the stage time and like working through it. The biggest advantage, of course, with their format though, is that you remove the risk of losing at any of those other points. Like if you have to go through all those other points, like that's a lot more risk that's been introduced into your playoff run. And so that's why I'm like the LCK playoffs setup or whatever is set up so heavily to advantage the team that wins number
Regular
one,
season.
because you literally just have to play at the end.
You just have to win that one best of 5. And even though there's that little bit of scared, I'd always want to be in that position. Like, I'd rather do that than have to be like, well, now I got to play the 8 seed, and then I got to play the 4 seed, and then I got to play whoever else. Like, no, just give me one best of 5, and then you win the whole thing. One thing I want to touch on as well before we move on, as far as playoffs go, LPL and LMS actually haven't hit playoffs yet. They take every spring split a huge amount of time off for Chinese New Year. It's like a 2 or 3 week break. So their regular season isn't even concluded yet. But one team I want to keep my eye on really closely this year is IG. For those of you who haven't been following the LPL, they have the best record in the LPL. They're 14-1 in best of 3s. The reason I've been so excited for this team is last year they finished 4th. So they were one spot away from making finals. They had been switching between Duke, the former SKT top laner, and the Shy, who was like this Korean solo queue god a lot of the year. Now they're pretty much running the Shy in the top lane, who's been beasting. They still have Rookie in the mid lane, who many people have been saying for years is like one of the best, if not the best mid laners in the world. He just doesn't make it to Worlds. And then the biggest thing to me is their bot lane, which used to be a weakness, is now really strong. We've talked about the guy on the show a little bit, but Jackie Love was like 15 or 16, or everyone was trying to prove that he was younger so IG wouldn't be allowed to start him. But now they have essentially super strong players in all 3 lanes and have been dominating the LPL. So really want to see if they can make it to MSI.
I've missed Rookie at international events. Not only his play, but him just in general. He's just one of the most like happy, outgoing people. So I'm definitely rooting for IG. I don't think again like they're gonna need much of the help, but I'm definitely rooting for them.
It'll be exciting too, and I mean expectations. I think no matter who makes it to MSI from the LPL, expectations are going to be very high coming off of Worlds, where the LPL was damn good, right? Like they clearly established themselves as the second best region in 2017, right? I don't think there was much question about that. So it's going to be pretty interesting to see, can they build on that? You know, are they going to be able to keep having these super strong performances and be the ones that are out there challenging Korea? But moving on, we're going to talk about some trash talk. There was a pretty popular thread. I didn't actually read the interview, to be honest with you, but Doublelift, was talking about trash talk and his quote on trash talk, essentially saying that, he trash talks before the match to build hype for it. If you trash talk after the match, you're basically just an asshole. So
he was trash talking in the interview
About trash talk.
about trash talkers that don't trash talk
He
as
also,
well.
He also, I mean, it's. I feel like so much of trash talk is where is your line for what is appropriate and what is trash talk? Because I think a lot of the stuff that Double F says, where when he's like, oh, there's 5 good teams in that Echo Fox or whatever, that's trash talk to him. But then some of the stuff that is pretty savage that he says in post game interviews, he would not see as trash talk. He just sees that as being honest. But other people would see it as trash talk, right? Like, as far as you're an asshole if you trash talk after the game. Well, remember his post-game interview, like against C9? He's like, yeah, we totally overestimated them. They're not very good. Like, why did we think they would be good? I don't get it. So a lot of people consider that trash talk, but I think he's just like, no, it's just honest, right? So it all depends on where you lie as far as that.
So a lot of the discussion around timing right now basically is what a lot of the resurgence of this conversation was, because Jensen had a tweet after their games.
The regular season best of 1.
Yeah, and so they all started retweeting this. I thought Team Liquid was supposed to be good tweet that he did. But I do exactly remember, Double Lift as well as Jensen both trash talking before and after games.
Yep.
So, both have happened. I do agree with the theory of this one though, right? Trash talking before definitely takes a lot
more honorable.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that made this surprise me with this thread is that it got to 22,500 upvotes.
Yeah.
It was massive. Actually click on the interview, because the interview is actually not just about trash talk, but credit to them for making the best possible headline.
Clickbait, baby.
He talks a lot about Team Liquid's 3-0 and his relationship with Ole and, what he thinks about Jin as an AD carry. But the conversation we're having is about the headline and the conversation afterwards. Speaking of trash talk, being able to trash talk before and after, I think, is healthy for the scene. It generates conversation. It creates hype. It does just kind of, I think, come back to sportsmanship at the end of the day. Have it banter. Don't make it super, super personal. Don't try to end someone's career with your trash talk. Yeah. But I like the tone that Double Lift hits. And I actually like the tone that Jensen hits.
Me too.
Most of the time. When he said he was going to clap Faker at Worlds and then got blasted, it made it more exciting, in those ways. And I think Jensen is also one of those players that does do it before and after, so I don't necessarily think his, I thought TL was supposed to be good was actually that mean-spirited. And Double Lift, to be fair, didn't directly call that out either. People are just speculating on those things. So, that's the way I like to see the trash talk.
And for me, I think, so, I've always been of the opinion that trash talk as much as you want, as long as you can take it too, right? And I think that has always been the thing for me. If people wanted to flame my team or whatever, great. But I'm gonna flame your team after we beat you.
So you're one of the post.
And I would do before or after, depending, right? So, but if if you're flaming me before the match, then I think you have to expect to get something after, right? I think that's only fair. Yeah. So it's just, to me, if you're gonna give it, you got to take it too.
Yep.
And otherwise, I think it's great. And personally, and I don't know if everyone agrees with this, but I think trash talk before a match builds hype. I think trash talk after a match builds rivalry. So that is kind of the difference between me, because I'm going to be pissed if Kobe is shitting on me after the game, right? He didn't say anything before, blah, 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 and then you're just going to take an easy shot at me, right? That makes me want to beat you. That doesn't make me want to beat your team or necessarily care as much about the comments. I want to prove you individually wrong, at least for me.
You're just building up hate. I can see it in your eyes.
So that for me is kind of why I like that, because I think rivalry in sports is a good thing. I don't think the players all need to be friends. I think the players can hate each other. I think that's great. I actually I'm not talking on a personal level, right? I'm talking in the game, wanting to blast this person. I actually like that, because I think that's exciting. I think that brings out more passion in the game. And I just love rivalry in sports. And in traditional sports, there certainly are those rivalries where you're oh yeah, they're just kind of friends, and then there's the ones where you're you see them, they're staring death at each other, and you're that's exciting.
Yeah, I agree that that's exciting. The thing about it, not being personal or whatever, I don't think that that's possible.
Yeah, that's true.
Their whole lives are playing League of Legends. Yeah. They practice all day, every day. We hear about the crazy schedules and everything like that. So if it gets to the rivalry point that you're talking about, staring death at them and stuff, that's definitely going to be personal.
I just mean more. So I should give a clarification as far as I don't think the trash talk should be personal attacks. More along those lines, right? So I'm all on board for Kobe being Azael played the worst like Udyr I've ever seen. He was garbage. What is he doing? He doesn't know how to build. He doesn't know how to play. But like attacking someone's appearance and things like that, that to me, that's my line, right? Where I don't think it's appropriate anymore if you want to talk about how the person looks or how the person sounds or their family or their anything like that. That to me is, okay, that's too far. But anything in game, flame him. I love it. I think it's great. I think trash talk before, trash talk after. Tell me how trash,
Trash talk
your
during. Get up from your seat.
Yeah. In the game, start hitting him with the emotes. I love it. I'm all about it. And that's my line. It's different for every person, but as long as it's not a personal attack, I'm all about it.
Summoner's code.
Summoner's code. Not toxic.
So this is just a random thing. I watched Steve's interview with Travis after Team Liquid won. And Travis asked him, like, who would you rather play, like, in the rest of the playoffs? And he was essentially referring to, would you rather play the number 1 seed or the number 2 seed, because it depended on if TSM or Clutch played. And he was like, well, I definitely want to play Clutch. They're terrible.
Yeah.
And Travis was like, so you can't play Clutch, but who would you rather play? He was like, oh, right. But then it also, something came out afterwards I think Clutch was talking about some of their scrims, and they basically were, it was Lyra was talking about Clutch's scrims and how they scrimmed against TL and they were losing so badly that their goal was to just not lose before 30 minutes and like judge if they were a team. So I feel like Clutch and TL were actually big scrim partners and TL was blasting them.
Yeah. There's been a lot of kind of return fire from Clutch even, so they went back and they were posting a clip from a Travis and Reggie interview early in the year where Reggie is basically just laughing at Clutch. He's like, there's just a team that's there to just get blasted by everyone and not just us. Everyone's going to smash them. Like, it's not just us, like they just suck. Like they got nothing. And, I love that stuff. I think that's great. I think it's exciting, the Jack and like this is definitely feels much more like friendly banter, Jack versus Steve versus Reggie, all that stuff. But I have really been enjoying that. I think the fans really enjoy that. And I think it's great. Like, the more owners, it gives personality to your team, gives personality to the individual. I think more of these guys should be getting involved in it.
Yeah, and I think Clutch has every right to like punch back and however they want. Everyone has been like counting them out the whole year, but also noting like what you said earlier, if you're going to dish it out, you need to be ready to take it in.
Oh yeah.
Like if they do a bunch of trash talking now and then next split they start losing, like they need to be ready for that to come back on them as well. So looking forward to seeing how that goes. You want to move on to a quick meta discussion?
Sure.
Let's go.
One thing that I was interested in last week was how there seemed to be different priorities on Swain. I'm actually very surprised that people were letting people play Swain, just in general. The fact that Team Liquid got it like 2 or 3 times, the fact that Clutch got it 2 times.
Cloud9 sticking to the triple tank ban.
Cloud9 sticking to the triple tank ban all 3 times. Like that's one that potentially had to do with scrims or something, or maybe Pobelter thought not Pobelter. Maybe Jensen thought he'd be able to deal with Swain really easily. It ended up being Licorice who had to play against it. But that champ to me just seems ridiculous in team fights. Like you actually can't team fight against an ulted Swain for the most part. What do you think? Is there a way to actually counter this champion?
So I'm of the opinion that in top lane you can punish it with fighters and things like this if you're willing to camp that. But you have to be aggressive. It's like a pre-6 thing. I see Swain very similarly, and I know it's not a 1-to-1 thing, but like as champions, like even like Kale and stuff like this that can push and can be aggressive and abusive in certain matchups, but are also I think fairly vulnerable pre-6, especially in top lane. As far as mid lane, I think the way that you play against this champion is not necessarily attacking him straight in the 1v1. I think you need to roam. I think that like his wave clear is very poor compared to a Talia or an Aurelion Sol or these sorts of champions. And I know in solo queue like statistically the best champion in the game against Swain is Aurelion Sol, and Swain has like a 44% win rate against Aurelion Sol, and it's one of those things where your win rate like. It's because he cannot push very well against it, and Asol can be affecting these side lanes, I think, very heavily, while he cannot really match that shove. So that's kind of how I see it, is if you try to attack this champion post 6 and he's even or ahead, it's almost impossible to take him down. And he is so strong because of that. And so maybe that's just saying, hey, it's too narrow of a win condition. If you have to beat him in this one specific way, then maybe he should just be getting banned and he's too good right now. And that's, I think, perfectly reasonable that he should just be getting banned. But I don't think that it's to say that there's like he's so insanely broken that there's no possible way to beat him, because I don't really think that that's true.
On the Lolalytics site, they also have like Cassiopeia has a very good win rate against him. And then like Kled and York if it's top lane, something like that.
Exactly. Like a lot of the fighters, like you can even see stuff like, I think Kled is really good into him, but I've seen things like Riven and Aurelia and so on. If you camp this guy pre-6, champions that can dash and all in you, it's very hard to survive, especially if you're trying to do the greedier builds like Huni was doing, because Huni would go tier as well. Then it becomes incredibly hard to survive. But in general, like I'm okay with teams just saying this should just be banned. If you're red side, it should probably just be banned. But I think partially the different priority comes from like maybe people have not practiced as much on some teams versus others and that sort of thing. And I'm expecting with how dominant it has looked in pro play, across the world, that come semifinals and come, like LCK and LPL playoffs and things like this, everyone should be playing it. Everyone should know how to play it and probably should just get banned.
It was like my Zoe bet on the All Stars. When I was like, Zoe's so busted. There's no way that she won't be 100%.
Someone always lets those champs through, Kobe. Until it has been proven to work, like beyond a reasonable doubt by everyone, someone's going to be like, maybe it's not that good. Maybe we can just count.
Or Isaac's point about, they don't have the player in that position hasn't been good enough or quick enough to pick it up. And that's a thing that I like that we continue to test in pro play for players. That's always something that comes up, how quick we change things or introduce things. But we saw it actually affect this season as well. Zyra Khan, the duo, was so tremendously powerful. And then I'll take Adrian, they couldn't really play it or didn't want to play against it as well. We saw in a lot of the pick bans early on, and like the teams that had been able to abuse it early on, got some wins against them and stuff.
I saw you called into Hotline League and even talked about Zyra Khan.
Yeah, I was trying to get some more out of Double Lift about like specifically what I'll take an Adrian weaknesses are, what he wanted to attack or what he wanted to do, whatever, because they're playing. So I was like, give me all your insights.
I predict that Double Lift will ward level 3 in the far bush.
Well,
then
I think
feint backwards.
They let me ward blue buff every single game.
And then I was gonna be like, well, look at this. So as you can see, I'll take an Adrian are doing blah 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 blah, and Double Lift is trying to counter with this.
Comes there with his notepad.
I think this actually transitions really well into the matchups we had this weekend in North American LCS. I'll start with Deco Fox versus Liquid because I wanted to talk a little bit about jungler champion pools. Dardoch hasn't played Skarner still, and Skarner's still really good. Will Dardoch play Skarner, or is Echo Fox going to have to ban it every single game?
So Dardoch, I don't know if this is a personal morals thing or something, but he does not like Skarner or people who play Skarner.
I know,
because he's
good.
It's for free ELO
it's for
or whatever.
bad players.
Yeah, and he's like, it's one of those
I don't buy that.
That kills
things.
me.
I don't buy that. I don't buy that for 1 second. I think that the people who are saying that are usually people who, for some reason,
bad at
bad at the champion, or they don't like the play style of the champion. I buy fully that he doesn't like playing the champion. I do not buy that it's just like this holier than thou. If you are a competitor, if you want to win as badly as I think Dardoch wants to win, I think you play whatever gives you the best chance to win, right? And I buy that he says, Skarner just isn't as good for my play style. I'm better on Zach or Olaf. Great, go for it. But I don't buy the I'm just too noble to play Skarner. I would rather lose than play Skarner.
That's
what it comes down to a lot of the time. And I've ran into these players for 10 years, playing competitive games, the ones that have their style that they think is the best style, and then they find ways to justify not picking up the other thing. I think with something like Skarner, though, it's something Dardoch should be able to play at an extremely high level of proficiency.
I think he
with
can.
a couple of weeks practice.
I'm sure.
I feel like he can.
I'm sure he can. But that's
It's
why
been a while.
That's why I think that it's just he's not as comfortable with that play style for whatever reason. Just like there's some people that for whatever reason, Lyra just looks so damn good on Skarner, right? And it's not that he can't play anything else. I don't think it's one of those things where for whatever reason it just fits his play style better, or it seems to like whatever they need, it's working well, right?
But Olaf and Skarner, I feel like, have such similar early game patterns. And then in late game, they're obviously a little bit different, but it's pretty much still like your Predator, you have a good early spike, you fall off late, you try and snowball the game, and then in between that, you're just pressing your buttons and farming camps at generally the same rate. Like, there's such similar picks. I'll be really disappointed if they ban it every single game.
They are for sure. The one difference, at least to me, when I think of an Olaf and I think of kind of like the mindset of Dardoch as like a more aggressive player, is I think Olaf can more easily get in the face of the other jungler and like win those fights and that sort of thing. Like I think that Olaf is stronger earlier, certainly. And that is the only real thing where I'm like, okay, maybe that's what he's prioritizing. He wants to be the guy who can dictate where the other jungler can go or cannot go and that sort of thing. And I also think Olaf is a good matchup in a Skarner, right? So it's like, as long as you can get that, I think it's totally reasonable. But am 100% on board that if a pick is that high presence, if a pick is that powerful, you should be playing it, like, because you should not be giving your team a disadvantage in pick ban, right? Like, and if you're unwilling to play it or cannot play it, and your team has to ban it every game as a result, then you have now put your team at a disadvantage.
Yep.
So he was looking really good on Zach, and Zach is definitely offers different things than Skarner also.
Totally.
So I can see them like wanting that. But then most recently, you got the Nocturne games in there where they were just, you're like, not sure if that one really fits in yet. And Sejuani in one of these games where Skarner was not banned. So yeah, that'll be an interesting thing that we can see unfold here in playoff.
And there's a lot more to the matchup as well. Like, it's Team Liquid coming off the 3-0. It's Echo Fox coming off their roster changes that they did in Week 9. So, I mean, you still have to kind of pick a favorite in this matchup. Based on momentum, the favorite actually becomes Team Liquid. But I will say that Huni has a lot to prove in the playoffs. Dardoch, Skarner's side, has had an amazing regular season.
Best jungler for the spring split.
Yeah, first team jungler, first team top laner. I think Phoenix is good, right?
Yeah.
If he's, worked over whatever reason he was that was benched, they never really went into detail on why that happened.
Yeah, and Arrow just said it was stress, right? So if he is feeling good going into playoffs, I mean, yes, he had some bad games. People think of the Fiora mid and things like this, and he was benched for the end and whatnot. But like, if he is on form as he was for most of the first half of the split, or even more than the first half of the split, Phoenix is really good, and you still have probably the best jungler and for sure the best top laner in the league. And that is a lot of strong points to play around.
Yeah, I mean, this one comes down to, at first glance, it's top versus bottom. Because Team Liquid definitely feels like a big advantage on bottom side. I don't think, have they declared which sub they're possibly using, Pop Chow versus
Don't
Devontae?
know if they've done so, actually.
Because they have to declare one.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting to see if Echo Fox actually bring like a bottom lane sub, or if they actually bring Devontae instead.
Because as a clarification for people who don't know the rule, there's 6-man roster lock for playoffs.
Yeah. Right, because essentially MSI will have a 6-man roster, so they lock it as 6 at playoffs. Even though during the regular season, they're technically allowed to run anyone from their academy team, but when playoffs hits, it's different. So.
Back to what you're saying.
And on the top side, like Huni changes every game that he's in because he's Huni. And it'll be very interesting to see what playoff Huni looks like this time around, because I feel like there's less room for creativity right now. People keep talking about, there's so many viable tanks. There are not that many viable other options. Gangplank still is there, kind of, and there are, you can pull out things like, Camille or something. Swain is basically a tank-ish champion. But I feel like there's a little bit less creativity in top lane right now, which might reduce some of the options for Echo Fox. On top of Impact was doing a very good job absorbing lots of ganks, lots of pressure, and he's very happy with the options of tanks plus Swain, as we saw in the last one. Even with 3 tank bans leveled at him, he was fine. Well. And he pulled out the Singe. He's like, hadn't played that in a long time, but he was like, oh, you know what? It's good here. I'm going to be a, singed pocket pick or whatever.
Yeah.
And that was maybe his best game even.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I totally think that Impact showed he is not able to be targeted in pick and ban effectively. I think if there's one thing you take away from the TL versus C9 series, those bans were not very effective. There was at times, I think, up to 7 top lane bans, and Impact was still looking fine, right? I do think that there is like opportunities for Huni, as far as like the creativity stuff. Yes, we saw Licorice, the Fiora fell flat, but I felt that was more about execution. Like, they failed that dive and these sorts of things. So I do think that if you want to see Impact on pure tanks, we could see like a well-executed Fiora be pretty effective, or, Trundle for Huni and these sorts of things can be pretty effective. But it's interesting because it definitely does feel very much like top versus bottom, and it does feel like the team who's able to better neutralize their opponent in that side will probably have a big advantage, right? And when I'm just kind of looking at it on paper, I'm like, well, I feel like Impact has a much better chance of neutralizing the top lane than Adrian and Altec do of neutralizing the bottom lane based on their most recent performances. Because we saw in the last couple of weeks, Adrian and Altec getting exploited not just by like Sven and Mithy and things like this. It was by, Mad, and it was by Lemon Nation and Arrow, and it was by some of the bottom lanes, which are considered the weaker ones in the league. So they need to really make sure that they're minimizing mistakes. And I think that has to be the biggest focus for the Echo Fox bot lane.
Yeah, and I would also cut it, like we cut it top to bottom, I would also cut it like early game versus mid games.
Yeah.
Because Team Liquid, even though it was 3-0 versus Cloud9, they lost the early game frequently in that series. And Cloud9 definitely showed some, openings that you can try and get there. And Echo Fox have had very good early games. A lot of it is, Dardoch and the team like tracking the enemy jungler super well and getting off a lot of early pressure, but I'm curious to see how it splits that way as well.
Yeah, one thing I'll say though is I don't know how Echo Fox can recapture what they were able to do in the first half of the season in the current meta. Because when they were getting these big early game leads in the first half, I think a lot of it had to do with Huni's specific power in all of the Gangplank matchups. Because GP was kind of the omnipresent top laner. Gnar was also super, super good. And Huni could blind those two champions, take over the game with it, or if you blinded either of those two champions, he would have a counter that could also take over the game.
People did abuse him on Gang. Like, he got camped on Gangplank and started out with a lot of deaths.
He did, but then he was always able to come back in the game. I need to finish this point as well, because that took all the draft resources away from teams to try and make that a good, like, something they could deal with, whether it was making sure they had a really good jungle top, and it made it so you could almost never ban other stuff, right? So Phoenix got Zoe more than anyone else when Zoe was OP, and Altec got Kalista more than anyone else in the North American LCS. He had like 5 Kalista games. And they won bottom lane with Kalista X almost every single time. So they had bottom lane pressure, and they'd still have Huni on that late game carry. Kalista kind of sucks now, and they haven't found that other pick. That if Huni draws all these draft resources, they then have this stable bot lane. They've tried Caitlyn, they've tried Varus, neither one of them have worked. And then on top of that, Huni doesn't have the same takeover power with the current champion pool. So I don't know how they can recapture that, and they'd have to kind of find a new way to win.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting, and you can kind of say, well, if you look at the last 2 games of the regular season, including the tiebreaker for them, both against 100 Thieves, they lost both of the games against 100 Thieves. Someday kind of showed you probably a lot of what Impact is going to be trying to do. Yep. He played a Cho'Gath game and he played an Orin game, right? And he was very effective in both. And Huni wasn't really able to get big advantages in either, as far as like, really abusing it. He was up a massive amount of farm, I remember, in the Gnar game, but not really able to convert that into much. And, again, had a pretty solid Shen game, but it's like, it does really feel like he is required to do more than a lot of other players. Like, he can't just win. He has to like blast a lot of the time. So it'll be interesting to see if he has anything prepared, because I do think there are opportunities, we talk about his flexibility in champion pool a lot. Swain has yet to lose a game in the NA LCS, the new Swain. It's actually 7-0 in top lane and whatnot. So like, and Impact is willing to play it. Huni is willing to play it. But Huni is a guy that I could see, if this is supposed to be this pick ban thing that Impact is going to take, if you give that over to Impact, I could see him being a guy who is willing to bring out a melee matchup and try to smash that and these sorts of things. Like, he definitely feels like that. He also feels like the kind of guy that would be willing to, I mean, we've seen his Lucian in GP and these sorts of things. Like, I think he could pull off a Fiora or something along those lines, or a Darius into a tank. And like, maybe they need that sort of extreme play. And I think that's just going to come down to how confident they are based on this like couple weeks of practice, right? Like, are you really confident in how your bottom lane is performing? Maybe their bottom lane has been performing great recently, and they feel that, you know what, Huni, if you just are doing pretty well, we're going to win.
That feels like such a a risky style, though. It does, right? And to me, it feels like they try to do like kind of a variation of that, where they picked Nocturne twice. Like, this was not them, and this was at the end of the season. Like that, whenever you're picking Nocturne, to me, it feels like they smashed some scrims. They wanted to snowball early. Dardoch and Huni are like their best players, so they want to get those guys some things that they can start to snowball or take over a game completely, like you're talking about. And if the other team is able to neutralize it, if the other team is able to get to late game, like Team Liquid were able to do in theirs versus Cloud9 over and over again, and get to the 5-on-5s and play objectives very well later, then it seems like that is kind of the higher percentage play.
I totally agree. It's just, do you need to take that risk is the question, right? If you are saying, you know what, our bottom lane is going to lose, right? Like, if you think, no, we can't. If
you think the bottom lane will lose, I think you do.
I think then you have to take that risk, because even if it's, to your point, not the highest percent, if it's like a 30 or a 40, maybe that's your best chance, right? Because Huni's just good enough that he can pull it off. But at the same time, like, then I totally am in agreement with, if they're saying, you know what, our bottom lane has been performing great, Phoenix is back on point, we can just play a normal game and win, then that's a more consistent game plan. And it just comes down to do you have that confidence in the rest of your team to perform, or are you saying all in on Huni?
Yeah.
It's tough to say because you have a finite amount of practice too.
Yeah.
So you have to make that bet like
pretty
10 days ago and say either Huni's going to be practicing tank counters or he's going to be practicing tanks and tank matchups.
Yeah, well, you have to also be ready to adapt. What if they, play game one, Alltech and Adrian are fine, everyone, talking up.
All right, Huni, just play choke
lane,
ass.
and they're like, whoa, okay, I guess.
Totally.
Predictions. First impression predictions. We're not going to hold this to it.
Well, our conversation all just revolved around like leading it towards the Team Liquid side, I feel like. So
last week, Kobe, just because I don't check the tapes constantly, just from memory.
I know I have to check the tapes.
Azale and I were both like, I think Team Liquid's got it. And you're like, I don't want to be persuaded by the Team Liquid conversation, so I'm going to go Cloud9.
But
that's what you said.
Also, to be fair, you guys both said 3-2.
We did.
I said 3-2. You said multiple times how close it was going to be.
So technically, we were still closer to the result.
Yeah. But I just said it wasn't like you were like.
Which team did you predict? I seem to recall we predicted Team Liquid.
I can take
and I believe that Team Liquid is in the semifinals, so that would make us. Correct?
Correct. Yeah. You're right.
Good job,
Superior
Dad.
analyst, superior
I
analyst.
will say,
You got me.
In this
By
series,
one game.
based on what we've seen, I would say Team Liquid 3-1. This would be under the assumption that Alltech and Adrian will probably lose lane to Doublelift Ole, and that the meta is not in the place where Huni can actually destroy Impact in a meaningful enough way to overcome what their disadvantages may be on the other side of the map. With that being said, I still think there's a high amount of variance in this series. This isn't one of those TSM's definitely going to be clutch types of series, but
where we were definitely wrong.
Yeah, that's not one we expected to have variance. This is one where I do expect a lot of potential variance because Echo Fox was experimenting a lot. Hopefully, they have settled on what they are most confident in, and I think that could still be very good. But TL3-1 is my first impression prediction.
It's interesting because Echo Fox, this whole discussion all year about this team has been about variance.
Yeah.
And at first we were worried about the mentality of the players and how they're going to work around, but now we have some more data.
Yeah.
Like the whole split of data to work with. And it's no more clear.
It's because
You're like,
I thought you were going to be like, and that means
it's because at the end of the split they started to fall off, right? Like if they had continued to play how they did throughout most of the year, like in the last couple of weeks, you would be saying, oh, okay, it's very clear. They're just a really good team. They're one of the top teams. They're going to be consistent. They're going to be great. But then these last couple of weeks, they started really falling off. They started looking a lot more sloppy. They bring in subs. They're losing more games. And then you're like, wait, were we right at the start and they're not as good, but it just took longer for it to fall apart? Or are they actually this good? Or what's happening with subs? What's going on? It's so hard to know.
Yeah.
This, especially the sub thing. Like, I'm waiting for the weird, like, M. Night Shyamalan twist at the end of the story here. Because, like, I still don't know why. Like, what was up with that? Okay, so Coach said for Phoenix, at least, he needs some rest. But then, obviously, there were problems that we saw with the bottom lane. And so they also tried out a bottom lane sub.
I have a theory.
Okay,
Totally unsubstantiated.
let's get into it.
I think it's future planning. I think Phoenix is an import slot who is good, but I think they think he has a cap. Like, Phoenix is a super strong lane player who's not necessarily a good roamer. If they can get that with the Monte, then they're planning on importing an AD carry next split. Potentially. Or next year.
I've also heard their Academy AD carry is actually quite good. I believe it's
and
lost,
he's an import.
and he is an import.
Yeah.
So if you actually want to play him, if your solution for bottom lane is not actually the support swap, it's the AD carry swap, then you need to have one less import, and you're not going to drop Huni.
I'm just guessing it's like long-term planning testing.
It does feel like that team is like Dardoch and Huni are the secure...
The core.
Yeah.
But that's kind of off topic. I said
Either way.
3-1. What's your prediction, Kobe?
Lock it in.
Azale, go first.
I need 45 more seconds.
I'm looking at their season right now.
Okay, he's crunching the numbers. It is really hard for me. I have some more faith. I think maybe a little bit more faith than you do, Jet, that Huni can make some of the tank counterpick type things work. But I still like the more I talk through it, the more I feel like it is TL favored. I think it's probably TL 3-2. But I could definitely see Echo Fox winning this, and I don't think it's just about top advantage in a 1v1. I just think I look more at, like, when I think how does Echo Fox win, I look more about the 2v2 on top side with the jungle, because when Dardoch is working really well with Huni, it's not just about how much better is Huni than Impact, it's about how much better are they playing together. Because to me, Echo Fox at their best is about that duo smashing lane. Even if Impact does not make mistakes, if Smithy is not there to cover him, you can get put behind even in, like, essentially a flawless top lane game. So that is the way that I see Echo Fox being able to take a couple games and potentially the series. But I have to lean more towards TL because Impact has been super stable, and I think their bot lane for Echo Fox has been too big of a weakness the last couple weeks.
Kobe looks like he's still contemplative, so I'll add one more piece of stuff that I'm thinking. I think as the season progressed, people changed the way they tried to deal with Huni, especially Team Liquid. When Team Liquid did the Camille Galio against them in the second time they played in the regular season, they camped for Impact. They camped Huni super hard. They threw all their resources at him. And yeah, they got rewarded a little bit, but they like never really took him out of the game. He always found his way to get farm and come back in. I felt like in the last half of the season, he was mostly just getting ignored. So they'd be like, all right, Huni, win that matchup by 4 to CS. We don't care. And then they would just kill the other 4 people over and over again. So they have to answer that, because I think that's how people are going to deal with him, actually. I don't think if Dardoch and Huni try and do the 2v2, I think they just let Impact be on his own, and Xmithy wins the other lanes.
Yeah, after the Team Liquid's last series, Double If actually even tweeted out, camp my top laner more, see what happens, or whatever, like that.
Huni is not licorice, though, and I think if Huni gets way ahead in a Fiora type matchup, you can just end the game by yourself.
Yeah, like a lot of these games here at the end of spring as well, I'm remembering Huni in the later stages feeling like the 1v9, right? And actually like pulling off triple kills by himself and
the
stuff
Vladimir
like that.
game they lost. Both the Trundle games he got massively ahead in farm,
games,
but he lost both those.
We still got another matchup to do.
This prediction is like
Thieves.
the anime hero Huni versus the team play Team Liquid.
Which is weird because Team Liquid wasn't even the team play team until like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Okay. I'll also go Team Liquid. I'm not gonna.
Ah, man.
I'm not gonna take
all that.
I'm not gonna take the other
I want my
side
money
this
back.
time. I was trying to make it happen. I was trying to be like, who's gonna pop off one game and then he's gonna start playing Lucian for the.
Punching the numbers. You're like, all right, this is game number 1. This is game number 2. Just couldn't find game number 3.
What's your series score then?
What I was really trying to find was Altic and Adrian are gonna play this, and it's gonna be fine, and they're gonna
Jin,
not
question mark?
be but all right. I think I'm gonna actually go. I'll go 3-2 for Team Liquid.
Hype.
But I feel like also the longer and longer the series goes on, the less chance that Echo Fox remain calm, especially if the games start to go late and stuff like that.
So you're saying they're going to be up 2-1 in the series, and then Liquid will win game 4 and 5. An oddly specific prediction from Kobe.
All right, Clutch versus 100 Thieves. We're moving on. So Clutch versus 100 Thieves, the two new orgs here in the league this year. Regardless, we're getting a new org in the finals. That's cool. We have a new champion. That's really cool too. Clutch obviously coming off of a historic defeat of TSM, which was pretty impressive. But 100 Thieves, they finished in first place. They had a ridiculously hot second half, 9-1 in the second half. I think that it's going to be a pretty exciting matchup. And I think, first impressions, you want to go 100 Thieves because of how good they were in the second half. But then you start, at least for me, I start to realize a lot of the same reasons I'm predicting 100 Thieves are the same kind of reasons that I thought TSM was going to beat them too.
So I feel like even though Clutch Gaming beating TSM like that is going to swing a lot of people, the interview after for me took a lot of the umph out of their win, because they were just like, yeah, we were getting totally smashed all the time, but on stage we just do better. We play better. We win on stage, and I was like, what? That's it. I was so much less confident after the interview.
It's next level coaching. Maybe they've been smashing in scrims. They're just tell everyone we suck so they keep underestimating us, man. That's really at the end of the split when they're MSI champions, they'll be like, we've been good all along. But I also think when looking at this series, you have to figure out exactly how they won against TSM. And I think while Clutch did play well, I think TSM played really badly.
Yeah, I agree.
They made a lot of really bad map decisions. They opted into a lot of fights that they definitely shouldn't have, and that ended up playing into Clutch's play style quite well. Hakuho was the outlier of the series, for sure, with how many hooks he was able to force in lane. But the whole impenetrable wall of TSM's bottom lane that everyone has talked about all year, and how Sven died 12 times in 20 games. He died 15 times in that series.
Yeah, he died more times in that one series than he did the entire spring split.
Is that true?
I believe it is.
Okay, I kind of made up the number.
That's what I had seen. It was. I did not actually go check through myself.
Yeah,
I saw it on Twitter actually.
Okay. We'll confirm that. I'm actually going to confirm right now. Let's see.
Yeah, but I mean, even in the one game he had on the COG1 game, he had 6 or 7 deaths. I know in the last 10 games of the split, he had 3 deaths, because I remember seeing that he had the exact same amount of deaths as Bjergsen, which was
18 deaths for the season, but he had 15 deaths in that series.
So almost as many.
In 4 games versus 20.
Pretty insane. I also think Lyra deserved a lot of credit. I think Lyra had a really good series too.
After game 1, where he was targeted by the whole team and they had Olaf and counter jungle and everything, I think he bounced back super well.
Yeah. But anyway, Clutch definitely showed up on the day. I think TSM absolutely did not.
Yeah.
So that still doesn't make me think that they're oh, now since TSM was the team on the path to the finals and now Clutch beat them. No, it was an upset win, right? So if they win again, it will be another upset win. It's not like they're suddenly favorites going into 100 Thieves, because I look at 100 Thieves, the way they ended the regular season, the way their bottom lane has been that bottom lane that wins, and how Cody Sun doesn't really die. We're setting it up, Kobe. Meteos has been a really
AD
good
carry who
jungler.
doesn't die. Oh, Sven.
Now, if they kill Cody Sun 15 times in the series, then we can start talking about Clutch.
Then you predict them to lose in the finals again.
Yeah.
Nobody kills 2 unkillable AD carries 15 times in the playoff series.
Cody Sun has the second fewest deaths of all AD carries in the regular season.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I tend to agree. I think you have to obviously look at the entire body of work from the team, right? And you have to think, okay, yeah, it is one really good series from Clutch, but that does not erase a lot of the issues that they had in the second half. And as far as the playoff teams go, Clutch actually did win both their regular season games against TSM. Yes, they lost the tiebreaker at the end, but that was one of the playoff teams that they actually did kind of match up pretty well against, even though it was earlier on. But I don't know, man. I think it's really it's tough to find, unless you think it is like going to be these incredible standout performances again. It feels tough to find a lot of the edges for Clutch.
All this being said, I am more confident in Clutch now than I was previously.
Definitely.
One thing I would say they shored up, I was convinced that, they had this champ select weakness, and Flip Bivens always playing Azir, and they have to get X late game champion from or whatever. But TSM banned Azir like every single time, just like advised.
Yeah.
And he just played Swain every single time. They gave up another very powerful pick for him. And then you started to run into like, oh, we're running out of bans now because Hako is actually popping off, as well as having these other restrictions where we wanted to try and keep this team down. So I think that gave me at least more confidence, and they have more versatility than I initially thought with its squad.
Yeah, I do think, at least for me, like my opinion is when someone is just performing so incredibly well on a specific champion, I think you just need to get them off the champion and make them show you something different. Like push them out of that kind of pattern that they're in a little bit. Because yeah, they were banning instead of the Swain, they were banning the Azir, they were banning Morgana instead of the Thresh, and these sorts of things. And those are obviously signature champions for those players. But I still think, from the opponent's point of view, you want to kind of disrupt some of the things that are working in the midst of a best of 5 series. But I mean, 100 Thieves, it's kind of interesting because Hakuo, like the way that he performed was absolutely incredible against TSM. But that's a lot of what the praise for Aframu has been, especially in the second half of the split, that he was able to take over a lot of games like this, and it could be a very, very high action game around support because it is, these two guys who have been incredible playmakers for their teams, and it's also guys who are pretty flexible as far as their champion pools, and both of them are willing to play the Morgana, the Thresh, etc. So I'm actually really, really excited for the support matchup in particular because I think that more than most series, it could be these guys actually dictating the pace.
Yeah, and I think while the support matchup is interesting, I also don't expect this series to be that fast-paced. Clutch was actually pretty much the slowest placed team in the North American LCS during the regular season, and 100 Thieves wasn't much faster. Yeah. That's why Cody Sun ended up late game carrying so many of those games, is because their lanes kind of play slow and they get Cody Sun a little bit ahead and then they win team fights. And I also want to just to talk about how close this series could definitely be. 100 Thieves is not your traditional number 1 seed. Normally the number 1 seed is 14-4 or 15-3 or 17-1. They're 12-6. And Clutch was 11-7 coming into the playoffs. So yes, it's 1 versus 6, but that was one game, dude, that separated them in the regular season before tiebreakers. So definitely possible that it's extremely close, and definitely possible for Clutch to still make the finals just based off regular season results alone.
It is, but it's also, I think, disingenuous to be talking about regular season results and not be talking about recency as well, right? Like how good were these teams in the second half? Because they are
definitely the number 1 seed based on the second half.
Exactly.
But they're not immortals.
No, they're definitely not immortals, right? But I do think that the 1 game difference feels like it doesn't accurately represent the strength of these teams going into playoffs, because 100 Thieves have been on such a tear going into playoffs, right? Their only loss in their last 10 was the one to Team Liquid. They would beat Echo Fox back to back on the last day, to earn that, and they had been so incredibly strong, I think, in the second half that they're much better than, at least their regular season much better than kind of that 1 game advantage. At least that's how I felt of the strength of these teams going into playoffs, and they also do hold a 2-0 over Clutch during the regular season.
That's the big thing
too.
for me as well.
Yeah. I also really like Prolly's coaching as well. So because they are the number 1 seed, they have the extra week to plan. They get this extra time to observe the TSM series for Clutch Gaming, and they have a lot of planning that can go into it. Probably talks a lot about how he likes this annoying, play style for his team, and that both Meteos and Aframu also, have those creative ways of thinking about the game. On top of the 2-0 and the most recent one, Sunday playing the Cho'Gath into the Gnar, and the way that they have Solo on Clutch Gaming where he doesn't get a lot of support. Like, there's definitely options for 100 Thieves as far as adapting in series. So I think it being a best of also lends some more.
One final thing I will say, though, before we get to predictions, is Prawley's never made finals. Like, he's constantly the guy who wins Coach of the Split in the EU LCS and does well in the regular season.
He's the reverse TSM.
And then his team finishes third. They lose the semifinal.
Well, wrap it up.
Every time. He's got to break that curse.
Easy 3-0 for Clutch then for Jet. What's your prediction?
So my prediction, even though I think there are some trends that work both ways, I do have to side with the 8-1 second half of the split by 100 Thieves rather than the 6-3 second half. It's not like Clutch was sucking in the second half either. But win quality, how poorly I think TSM played against Clutch, and how bad Clutch has been doing in scrims, and how even they don't actually seem that self-confident makes me think 100 Thieves 3-1.
Also, so I would agree, and I was also going to go 3-1. But I think that something else that people haven't really talked about was Meteos over the split, because he was coming from literally not even playing League of Legends. He was streaming WoW a whole bunch and and like doing other stuff, taking breaks. But him, especially in the second half, I thought he has improved a lot. Everyone was eyes on Mike Young because, he's the new guy on there and he's going to have to improve a lot over the split or whatever. But I thought because Meteos took such a long break, it might take him as well some while to readjust to competitive play. And he has stepped up in a very big way for this team as well. And I think he's playing at a very high level now. So, I think 100 Thieves also had some good improvements over the split. What about you, Azael?
Yeah, I'm actually was thinking about the same prediction, which feels bad to
Damn, we're all the
third
same.
guy
These
doing the
monkeys
same one.
up
Super
here.
wrong, man. Now that
We all
in
convince
agreement,
each other into saying the same.
just a hive mind.
It's also interesting. Like, we haven't actually talked about the top lane at all, and someday everyone wants to probably put as an advantage like in the top lane for 100 Thieves, and I do agree. But Solo, I think, maybe should be getting some more credit at this point, because I do think he has had some really strong performances as far as even on the tiebreaker day against C9. Not like he's not the focus of their team at all, but he seems to be able to really absorb a fair bit of pressure and still be like. He's not usually he's not the reason they lose. It feels like he's always going to be pretty stalwart in the top lane. He's finding some pretty good late game contributions, and I've been kind of more and more quietly impressed with how Solo has been playing. So I'm really interested to see how that top lane matchup is going to go again, because it didn't feel like he was able to get exploited in quarterfinals by Hanser. It didn't feel like he was able to be by Licorice and C9 all camping him, and there are certainly ways for Clutch to win this series, and I think a lot of that looks like if teams want to focus Solo and he's able to hold on, the bottom lane and the mid lane and these sorts of things can start to take over, because Febiven is incredibly good, and he is, I do think, somewhere where like that I see as an advantage for Clutch for sure.
Yeah, I think definitely for these ones where we all end up predicting the same team, we should give the arguments for the other side, since we have the arguments for the other side, even though we end up with the same predictor. I also think, because I was just talking so much about Meteos, but Lyra, like you were saying in their series especially, he talked a lot in interviews, remember in the beginning of spring, about he didn't like the changes to the jungle. This guy was always, oh my God, that Lee Sin play. Oh my God, this, Nidalee play. And he's trying to carry Envy and he's stacking up kills and everything. This was a big adjustment for Lyra as far as this meta. And I think that him as well has kind of settled into it.
Yep.
So, Clutch Gaming definitely has some pros as well.
All right, 3-3-1. Let's do some Twitter questions right now. I like this Twitter name, LeBron's James. Good Twitter name. Huni has been getting a lot of criticism for his squishy build choice on Gnar in the 100 Thieves Echofox game. Do you think he is so focused on trying to carry his team with damage that he is actually a driver for some of their losses outside of the laning phase?
Wasn't Huni the one that built Asterix on Gnar?
He built Asterix.
He does.
I don't like that. That doesn't pop when you're ranged, right?
No, it doesn't pop in your range.
Yeah.
So he's had a few times where he also, I think, earlier in this split built Sterix plus Ma on GP. So like I think he's maybe not fully in the know on some of the changes with that stuff, or doesn't realize how some of the interactions work.
Or just loves Sterix.
Or just loves Sterix. Just thinks it's a cool item. But I do not like the criticism of his build at all. Like, and I think there's so much like revisionist history comes into play when people start talking about these sorts of things. With like, this goddamn Honey is losing us games with these carry builds in the top lane. It's like, have you watched him play at all for the last like 5 years? He does this all the time. This is a guy who, builds PD on Gnar and things like this. Like, this is how he plays. This is how he wins games. It is his play style. He has made it work in multiple regions over many years. I do not think it is fair at all to criticize that and point that as like the reason of failure. If you want to say his play in this game was poor because of X and Y, then great. But I don't think that attacking his play style when it is also like the biggest reason for most of Echo Fox's success throughout the split is legitimate at all. And to me, that's kind of just point blank. That's it. I don't
Nailed
agree.
it.
Yeah. As far as simplifying it into building too much damage or building too much tank, I would definitely say that those are like some generalist criticisms that just don't make a lot of sense. I want a player like Huni who is extremely mechanically gifted and makes decisions really, really well, and like sees what he wants to do in a fight so well, to have a lot of damage in his hands. Yeah. I actually want him to be be on like a DPS character because he's going to get a lot of value out of that stuff while also doing a good job of avoiding. And I'd rather stick someone else on, okay, you're the frontliner, you bring the CC or create an opening for Huni to actually work with.
Yeah.
And also
Phoenix on Scion mid and Huni on Ryze top.
Yeah.
Oh, what's my prediction?
There you go. I mean, it's also why you can continue to extend advantages in a 1v1, right? Because if you go Gnar, you build Black Cleaver into full tank, and you're playing against a Cho'Gath, the Cho'Gath is just building pure tank. There gets a certain point where you don't hurt him anymore, right? You need to continuously build damage if you want to be able to pressure him. That's why he was up, 130 CS. You could say, hey, it's his fault for not being able to convert on that. Great, but Bill was fine. IMO.
Yeah. Jay at Stickobi says, Jack stated that, so C9 Jack, stated that they would not make any changes to their roster after exiting playoffs, but should C9 consider running a 6-man roster again, similar to what they did with Impact and Ray last year?
6-man roster with who would be my question.
That's the big question.
If you have a sick player, if
Their
they have
academy team's got what? Golden Glue.
They got Wiggly.
Are you swapping Golden Glue in for Jensen? Are you swapping Zazel in for?
I'm just trying to say the roster, bro.
No. I'm not trying to attack you. I'm just trying to.
You can't do it.
No, I just mean as far as like it's hard to see where the player is that you'd want to swap out, right? Because Zazel, I think, is a guy who maybe should be getting some LCS play, right?
But not taking out Smoothie.
Probably not on C9, right? Probably on one of these other teams.
Not taking out Sneaky for Keith.
Yeah.
Even if Keith has actually had a great year in Academy.
Yeah. So I mean, it's like if you want to talk about Sword and Shield, like Impact Ray, you need the shield. Then you need your guy who's going to be this bomb tank player. But to me, Licorice was so promising in his first year that I'd rather just see them invest in him and develop him.
Yeah. I agree. I
mean, I'd always love to have more players, and you do have to have a 6-man roster for declaring the sub for international play and stuff. We talked about the format.
Yeah.
So every North American LCS team should be putting resources into finding the best possible 6-man or whatever for whatever position they think they could make the most gains by having a switch. Because Licorice is new and he's still developing, even though he has a lot of promise. Maybe it would be the top lane. I would say either top lane or jungle would probably be the two positions for Cloud9 to look for support players or sub players for the 6.
I think if they were to look at a 6-person, I would look in the jungle. And I kind of hate that I end up still doing this, but it's kind of just like the reality of our ecosystem. If you are taking up one of the 2 import slots, it's more advantageous for the org to try and have a non-import slot become a serviceable replacement, because that just opens up your options for what your weaknesses could be, theoretically in the future. So if they got their Academy jungler to the point where Svenskeren was, and Licorice isn't performing well, then they can get a top laner from anywhere in the world now. It just becomes more flexible. Last question, though. I think this is actually kind of interesting. From @DarkKnifu, should Flash get nerfed? And I know we've talked about this before, but everyone uses it, and according to the league logic, that means it's imbalanced, blah, blah, blah. I'd personally like to see it change to reward aggressive flashes, kills/assists within X seconds. What do you think about that? Like if Flash, if you got a kill or assist within 5 seconds of using it, you get a minute off the cooldown. Is that too snowbally, or is it just cool?
It's definitely cool.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
It's my initial reaction.
I think it's definitely snowbally. But if it means you're flashing in more aggressively, the game probably just becomes more fun.
I mean, so like my hesitation with all these sorts of changes when I hear people talking about it is I think it doesn't necessarily change the pace of the game. It changes the champions that you can play in the game. I always think, so like I play Phil. I think other lanes are always less impacted about this. So that's why I always talk about top lane in it, because top lane is long lane, 1v1. Like when I see changes like this, when I see people talking about, oh yeah, just like remove TP and just make it only ignite, it just doesn't necessarily make me play that different. It just makes me only pick Jace and stuff like that.
Picking a different, like changing the champions you play is going to make you play differently.
Yeah,
also.
It's true. That's true. But I just think that you cut out like a lot of champions the more you like really make it about like ultra aggressive picks.
Yeah.
That's my concern. And I think Flash shouldn't get nerfed personally, because I just think that Flash is like, yes, everyone uses it, but Flash is really interesting. Flash is really interesting as far as like aggressive plays, as far as defensive plays. It's very powerful. It's I think one of the like coolest / most important like kind of resources that you have in League. So that's why I personally really like the ability and like that it's kind of everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's why they've kept it this whole time.
Yeah.
Right? There's a reason that Flash has been basically a permanent one of your summoner spells for the duration of League's life.
And even though this Twitter question is, should Flash get nerfed? I say that's a no. But the second half of the question, I feel like, is, should it be buffed? Like, should a killer assist to Flash actually give you a shorter cooldown? And I think it would be a little weird if I'm thinking about the way a team fight plays out. Like, hey, we won the team fight. So whether or not we were flashing aggressively or defensively during that team fight means all of our flashes are now up before yours. And that's actually going to be lame. And the amount of situations where the flash forward actually gets rewarded versus the flash backwards getting punished, I actually think is slim. It's more just like, if you're winning, then you flash during a kill. Congratulations, you did it. So I don't know if you're actually getting the gameplay, but I'm actually really intrigued by this.
I mean, it's definitely interesting that anytime you would change something like this, there has to be a lot of champion balance accompanying it, right? Because like I'm just like, then you're playing like Skarner with Spellbook and Lucidity Boots, and you have like an ultra short flash, and flash ult is almost always a cooldown in the earlier stages.
And then it's no longer cool.
And then you have like a minute off your 2-minute flash, and now you're just doing it every minute. You're getting a guaranteed kill. And
junglers are better than everyone else because we always flash aggressively at the lane. I trade my flash with the mid laner.
Kobe's in there on Vi. Kobe's in there on Vi. He's in there on Skarner.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah,
it's probably not going to.
It's a cool idea, but it would require a lot of stuff that goes with it.
Awesome. Thanks for the Twitter question, guys. Remember, you can always hit us up at RiotJat, at RiotKobe, at RiotAzael. Use the hashtag #TheDiveLOL so we can search for it. And that's it for this episode of The Dive. Next week, we have a special episode. We're going to film it in Miami, and we'll have some guests that we'll announce later in the week. Because of that, we're moving from our usual Wednesday release to releasing on Friday, because we have to schedule around the finals and actually film it there. So make sure, keep an eye on social media, Lolly Sports, or our Twitters. We'll keep you up to date on when that is going to be released. As far as that, those semifinals are this weekend: Echo Fox versus Liquid and Clutch versus 100 Thieves. That kicks off at 1:30 p.m. Pacific time on Saturday with NA LCS Countdown. So see you there.
See you there.